Here is an unforgettable figure from Montmartre, in a gallery of original and eccentric Parisians. Bibi Le Purée holds first place. This vagabond with curious morals, but always honourable, well, mostly, was a well-known character in the Latin Quarter, a man who left his mark on the butte with his banter and his elaborate gestures. A scarecrow, a drunkard, a street poet, a schemer, sublime tramp, king of Bohemia, kleptomaniac, mythomaniac, sarcastic confabulator. What has not been said about him? An ambulatory character who shared the likeness of Voltaire, generally wearing a moth-eaten tall hat, from which a few hairs escaped in confused strands, and even fewer teeth. Bibi Le Purée enlivened the streets of Paris with his picturesque silhouette for a third of a century. Born André Joseph Salis around the middle of the 19th century, most sources say 1848, Bibi's pseudonym reflected his meagre circumstances, être dans les purées, meaning to be in miserable straits. He survived the hard cobblestone streets of Paris by any means necessary, shining shoes, selling flowers and postcards, or reading the poems of others, which he claimed to have penned. In essence, he was, as many dandies also were, a flaneur. Two or three times a week, armed with any one of his numerous borrowed umbrellas, draped in an old mouldering frock coat, a wilted flower in his buttonhole, the inevitable unlit cigarette butt clenched between his lips, he climbs with a certain urgency the steep slopes of the Rue de Martyrs, to finally sit on the terrace of the Auberge de Clou. Winter and summer this routine never varied. Here he would enjoy a cup of black coffee. The owner of Le Clou, a jovial man who adored all eccentricities, loved seeing this eccentric figure adorn his terrace and arouse the curiosity of the passers-by. Bibi's grandfather, Jean Salis, had emigrated from his village in the Swiss canton of Graubünden to Livradois in France to seek a little less misfortune. Bibi's father, who worked as a tavern keeper, entertains the Ambert Literary Circle. Bibi was, at the age of 16, taken in by his priest uncle, who became his guardian and paid him a small annuity. In the bustling Latin Quarter, Bibi plays the role of student, poet or sculptor, while to survive he sells images of himself on postcards. He shines shoes or lights the stove of some Montmartre painter who is slightly less poverty-stricken. His favourite little task consists of bringing Esther Boudon the sweet notes from her lover, Paul Verlaine. Bibi being Verlaine's secretary, this he proudly tells all who will listen. Paid for these services, the tips collected are transformed into libations at the Procope or Boulmiche Café. Employed on a permanent contract, as far as Bibi is concerned anyway, begging for a cigarette or a beer and filling Verlaine's pipe, while waiting for the anticipated moment when Verlaine shares an absinthe with him. He sleeps at the night shelter or with anyone who will provide him a roof for the night. Bibi sauntered between Montmartre and the Latin Quarter, greeting anyone he encountered with a flourish of quaint old-world gestures, these movements causing those in his orbit to step outside the radius of his pungent clothes. A whole jumble of miscellaneous objects he offered to passers-by in exchange for a witticism or a smile. Students from the Sorbonne often donated an absinthe, and occasionally their unwanted clothes. It was during an evening at Verlaine's that this amiable street gent was reborn from his ashes under the name of l'Abbé La Purée, which was quickly reduced to Bibi. He was baptized in champagne by the poet. In all modesty, Bibi himself sums up his entry into immortality as follows. A glorious name is composed between the green of absinthe, the gold of champagne, and the white teeth of women. Bibi Le Puré's profession was always quickly proffered to the gendarmerie to ward off charges of vagrancy. He was an annuitant. On occasions he appeared before the courts for petty offences, which in no way tarnished his professional honour. When the judge demanded his name and profession, Bibi Le Purée would announce with the most exquisite complacence, Bibi Le Purée, lord of Salis and other places, and rentier. The real Salis, lord of Nantes and Châteauville-en-Vexin, did not like people to abuse his name. He threatened with his thunderbolts, which were, in this case, solid fists. The presumptuous Bibi avoided carefully the Rue Victor Massé, where the illustrious lord had his castle. Besides, poor Bibi's annual pension was only 400 francs. And he was only an annuitant for one day in the year. The day he received his income, he happily squandered it in the time it takes for the earth to make its half revolution around the sun. Fortunately, it was on June the 21st, the longest day of the year. He was thus an annuitant for a little longer. "I live," he said, "for one day the life of a millionaire. The rest of the year I remember it." A description of the Latin Quarter and its inhabitants reported of Bibi that his costumes are varied and his wardrobe seemingly inexhaustible, although another account suggests that he changed dresses more often than shirts. One astonished cafe loafer saw him in a top hat and elegant overcoat, but without shirt or collar. Poet Jehan Richtus called him a fitted and malodorous Brummel. The artist Steinlen described him as a dandy even in his rags, with a buttonhole in his soiled and shapeless jacket. Every time Bibi would find himself in the street as the cherished Verlaine, he quickly hurried to offer his noble services. Bibi had taken it upon himself to polish the poet's shoes in perpetuity. For this waxy ministration he refused any offer of payment. This was his duty. And if Verlaine had the misfortune of wanting to reward his little work with the gift of a few coins, Bibi draped himself in his dignity and refused them with the gesture of an outraged emperor. Verlaine had ended up cautiously avoiding the streets and boulevards where Bibi lay in wait for him, armed with his merciless brushes which he concealed in the pockets of the skirts of his frock coat. One day Verlaine, to discourage him, went out barefoot. Bibi, not at all discouraged, rushed to his bare feet and polished them. Verlaine from that moment on no longer put up any resistance to Bibi and resigned himself to his fate. Bibi had met Verlaine in 1886 and became the poet's factotum. Part of his job description was getting Verlaine home safely after his habitual drinking bouts, but witnesses seeing the two unsteadily leaving a bar arm in arm could never be sure who was helping whom. The poet Yeats met Bibi while on a visit to Verlaine, and recalled a slovenly, ragged man, his trousers belted with a piece of rope and an opera hat upon his head. Another time, a visitor who was kind to Bibi, and having lingered in his company until the ungodly hour of 4 a.m, prompted the noble wanderer to insist on taking him back to the door of his lodging, the Hôtel du Poiret. This, Bibi explained, was to protect him in case of attack. Arriving at the door of the hotel, I thanked Bibi warmly and wanted to offer him a 20-sou coin. Bibi's expression drastically changed. I thought he was going to do me a disservice and launch an attack on me. "You offend me," he shouted. "Never from friends. Bibi doesn't eat that bread. Bibi is not a beggar." With this gallant act completed, Bibi marched proudly off into the cold night. Although threadbare, Bibi was not entirely repulsive. He shaved fairly regularly, took a bath in the Seine from time to time, and wore linen which, although questionable, never reached the limits of total decomposition. Bibi was not always easy-going, though, and did not like to be disrespected. Once he was seen to use an umbrella, his favourite weapon, to beat a person who had insulted him. Bibi was very gallant with the ladies. He very often removed from the buttonhole of his frock coat a sad violet or a wilting pink carnation, and offered the floweret and his services with a charming smile. Bibi was a kind of saint. He never spoke ill of his neighbour. He loved reading, freedom, and the streets of old Paris. For whole days he would be seen on the quays or under the galleries of the Odeon, leafing through old books or magazines. His homes were vague and undefined. The vaults of the arches of the Pont Neuf or the benches of Boulevard Saint-Marcel never presented their rent receipts to the tenants they sheltered. Bibi was the ultimate night owl. He preferred to sleep during the day, to be ready to aid Verlaine come evening, to ensure the poet's shoes were bright and shining for the evening's festivities. He passed among the students, the grisettes and the bohemian painters, like a character from an extinct era, the spectre of Voltaire, of whom nothing remained but the smile, and whose malice had vanished. When Verlaine died, he received from his friend his pen, his inkwell, and one of his shirts. Bibi became the official dealer of the deceased's objects and letters. Trafficker in relics, Bibi sold hundreds of pens and shirts, which, he assured gullible students, had belonged to the poet. Bibi also became the model for a whole host of artists, painters, sculptors, and poets, who ended up crowning him, in those times of fin de siècle decadence, King of Bohemia. Bibi Le Purée died on July the 24th, 1903, at the Hôtel Dieu in Paris, in his 55th year. For a long time, devoured by fever, he had been visited by horrible nightmares, populated by the ghosts of his past life, and was tossing and turning in pain, until finally finding the rest that life had never provided him. He who declared that the world is nothing but a vast hoax, a joke of the Creator. In the years that followed, a float bearing his image was paraded through the streets of Paris by students during the carnival. Then his fading ghost disappears. His shaky silhouette no longer suits the costumes that ready-to-wear modern world standardizes. Bibi's elegant vagaries are gradually eaten up by the media model, which imposes poses, postures, and even grammar. Remembered again, we kindred eccentrics recognize and salute Bibi La Purée. Bibi La Purée. Bibi La Purée. Bibi La Purée. Tonight we explore the extraordinary life of Adelina Patti, from international superstardom to the creation of her dream castle, and we examine the chilling accounts that continue to surround it to this day. Long after the applause faded and the last curtain fell, strange stories began to emerge from its corridors and grand rooms. Visitors, staff, and paranormal investigators have all reported unexplained phenomena, leading some to wonder whether the castle's former residents ever truly departed. So dim the lights, settle into your chair, and join me as we step beyond the grand stage and into the lingering shadows of one of opera's most fascinating legends. For in some places, the final performance may never truly end. Two boys living in rural England in the 1950s had stumbled across the ruins of a cottage while exploring in the woods. There wasn't much left of the dwelling, but they spotted a stone entrance leading down to the cellar. Suddenly, one of the boys heard the sound of breathing coming from the dark cavern. Feeling compelled, he ventured down into the darkness. Something had been waiting for a long time. After parasitically connecting to one of the boys, it now had the strength to roam abroad and search for more victims. Is time running out for the remaining boy? Plus, bonus story, the quiet work of a jealous mind. A scientist suspects his wife of having an affair and plans a terrifying revenge. Not all is as it seems, though.
He won't be home till 9, so we can have 3 hours alone.
There are many ways to skin a cat.
My dear friends, I do hope you enjoyed the presentation. Bibi Le Purée, the most eccentric tramp in Paris, now a ghost, but then a very real person. And I found it fantastic that all these artists, basically appointed him their muse. He was the guy that they were going to paint and sculpt. I also just looked and saw that Gauguin also did a sculpture of Bibi Le Purée. Plus this sculpture by Jean Balul. Fantastic. I love that one with the baggy pants. Isn't that wonderful? Perfectly rendered. And also Paul Verlaine left this dedication to him, and sometime after his death in the 1920s, or I'm not sure exactly the date when it started, but they start making these comics. This one's from the 1920s, and I'm guessing it's based on his character. Also, I saw that they made films. Some French actor was playing the part. Any French people out there who are movie buffs, vintage movie buffs, can they tell me whether that was based on Bibi Le Purée? But definitely these artworks that we saw in the presentation and this sculpture are definitely directly sculpted from the muse Bibi Le Purée. Isn't that fantastic? It must have made him feel wanted, that these people took an interest in him. I found that really, really cute. I did read somewhere that he went to Paris. I think he was studying to be a lawyer. Something happened. I'm thinking a mental breakdown. He just couldn't cope with the studying. It does happen, if it's just too much, if he's a sensitive person, all this information going in, and it probably was not the right profession for him. But yeah, I think that's what's happened. He's had a mental breakdown. But it seems like he enjoyed his lot. He had a lot of fun sauntering around the haunts of Paris. By the way, I just found out also that he had a female counterpart. And as a bonus, we're going to now take a look at her life. There's not much documented of it, but apparently they knew each other and even lived together for some time. So this is crazy. We're going to have a look at this right now. So her name was Mother Casimir. And this is from a French website, so I've translated it into English. We're going to have to just read between the lines. There's going to be a few sort of grammatical strangenesses. Okay, just like Bibi Le Purée, Mother Casimir, whose real name is Marie Josephine Emonet, frequented the Latin Quarter. This is evidenced by these lines taken from, I'm not even going to try and pronounce that, or shall I, just for a laugh? L'intermédiaire des recherches et curieuses. I'm probably way off there. Of July the 15th, 1900s, a few days after her death. Because remember, in the French, it seems to always be his when it really means her. An old woman has just died, famous in the Latin Quarter under the name of Mother Casimir. She was a former dancer whose mother prided herself on having been distinguished by Charles V. At least as assured by her daughter. The students were fond of this strange old woman who lived off their generosity. She appeared in effigy in an occasional piece written by them. She was also part of a cavalcade as a legendary character. Or even this portrait of Mother Casimir, which I'm now putting on the screen because it doesn't display on the translation, taken from the almanac of the newspaper. I'm not even going to try that. This is what it says about her. Hybrid nature, anti-sexual, with a desperately flat chest, such is Mother Casimir, little old woman with a sour voice, a sinuous and shriveled face, who we see every evening near the cafe terraces of Boulmich, with a basket on her arm dancing some sort of jig. Well, that's not a very flattering description of her, is it? Okay. You will recognize her who frequented Boulmich. Can we read on this postcard from July the 30th, 1900 to Sydney, Australia? Somebody wrote that to Sydney, Australia. I'm guessing it's Sydney, Australia, or perhaps somebody called Sydney. What fame! But it is above all in the news section of the Journal Le Temps of July the 7th, 1900, published the day following her death, that we will learn most about this little lady. Mother Casimir is dead. It is appropriate to inform the generations of students who have spent many years passing through the Latin Quarter of this disappearance. It is not them who should be remembered for the dim and slightly stupid face of this little old woman, her head always bare, her long white hair spread freely over her stooped shoulders, and her summary and shabby outfit. To those who did not know Mother Casimir, let us introduce her. She was one of the notables of the Latin Quarter. Celebrity today is consecrated by the ditty and illustrated postcard. Mother Casimir has her postcard which displays her full-length photograph, and which she herself advertised, and she has her song, These Are Triplets. I don't think this is translated very well, but let's have it a go. She trots, menu, menu. She looks like a Carabosse fairy, with her body all twisted up. She trots, menu, menu, shaking on a not very fleshy neck, her old childish head. She trots, menu, menu, she looks like a Carabosse fairy. Okay. How did Mother Casimir achieve this enviable celebrity? First of all, there was a legend about her. The little old woman readily affirmed that Charles Dix or D had a look of complacency for her mother. She also said in the past she had great success as a dancer, but that she had been a leading subject in a major theatre. The only proof we have was her words, sometimes intoxicated. However, despite old age, she retained agile legs. Every night in front of the cafes, she went and came from one table to another, her arms like zephyr wings, for 2 sous making graces. In fact, it was her safest livelihood, and, in any case, the only proven one. But it was neither her dances nor her legends that had made Mother Casimir famous between the Bullier Ball and Pont au Change. She was known above all because, in this Latin Quarter, where everything passes so quickly, where the wildest students transform early into notaries or justices of the peace, and where girls die so young, Mother Casimir did not pass by. Each time she returned from vacation, she was always there, and the old students introduced her to the newcomers. Mother Casimir and her rival Bibi la Purée held to the ground of the Sainte Geneviève mountain as firmly as the Pantheon. She had been dancing and drinking on the terraces of the Boulevard Saint-Michel for 50 years, when death, which uproots everything, made her suddenly disappear. Besides, the little old woman who laughed for 2 cents. She had a poor wife, he had a poor wife, not really sure about that. A little crazy and very unhappy. Now that she is dead, we can talk about her private life. Casimir's mother's name was Marie Josephine Emonet. She was born in Parnes near Pantin a long time ago on March the 22nd, 1827. Officially, she was a flower seller. It is in this capacity that she was registered with the charity office of the 5th arrondissement. She admitted to a daily gain of 50 to 75 centimes. She received 10 francs per month from the office. It wasn't much, because the little old lady drank a lot. But what poisoned her existence in recent years was her relationship with Bibi la Purée. This last character, a bony and grimacing face, well, that's not right. Isn't that funny how some people spoke very kindly of him, and others were quite nasty about him? I think it really sort of reveals the personalities of the people, if they're talking nasty about him, and the ones who spoke kindly about him. A bony and grimacing face, a pointed nose, a tugged chin, with pride lounging in a fraying suit, was, he assures us, one of the friends of the poet Paul Verlaine. Well, he was, that we know that for sure. He was the one who shined his shoes. With Verlaine dead, he began to exploit Mother Casimir. Surely not. We have to give Monsieur Bibi la Purée the benefit of the doubt, because we don't know what the truth is here. How do they know this? But anyway, The two old people lived together, hating each other, in an infamous apartment on the Rue de la Pogemania. In their hands every month the 10 francs from the charity office melted like snow in the sun. This association lasted a year or two, until the morning when Mother Casimir kicked out Bibi la Purée. Their quarrel was the delight of the Latin Quarter. We had fun bringing them into continual encounters, and the scenes of this improbable household were wildly gay. To console herself, Mother Casimir drank more and more, until she was put to bed at the Petit Hospital in a white bed. She only passed through. She was I guess that means she died. She was taken a few hours later to a common grave. Not long ago, Mother Casimir had an hour of triumph. In the last procession of Lent, she appeared alongside her inseparable enemy, Bibi la Purée, on the most beautiful float in the Latin Quarter. Doesn't say who wrote this. I would like to know. I haven't found any more. If I do find any more about her, I will certainly let you know as an addendum. Isn't that interesting, though? At the moment, I can only find one photo of her. If I find any more, I will share it with you before this video ends. If I don't find any more, then I will love you and leave you, and do hope you have enjoyed the story of the irresistible, charming Paris vagabond, Bibi la Purée. Take care, my friends. God bless, and bye-bye. Although I didn't find another image of Mother Casimir, I just remembered this image which I wanted to comment on. I found this postcard. I've added the English translation on the left there. I find that very interesting. I didn't know that. So you could go to this Hall Centrales and you could buy leftovers from restaurants in Paris, from every kind of dish. Isn't that fascinating? Would have been better if they were giving it away to the poor homeless people and the poor people, but I guess they could buy it very cheap. I think that's a great idea. I wonder if any other countries had something like that at that time. Of course, nowadays they have food banks, which is great, but I just found that very interesting. I've never seen anything like that before. And on that note, I'm definitely off now, my dears. Hope you enjoyed the presentation. Bye-bye.